To invest in this, just to give you a bit of context, this year, the large AI companies are going to spend 20 times more on developing this technology than the US did for the Manhattan Project. Because if you think about seminal moments where the government mobilized to do something, 20 times more just this year alone. So I thought, look, it's vital that we do this in a different way, not like the G7 and G20. We bring industry, innovators, and government together, and that's what we did at Bletchley Park a few years ago. The summit series went to Paris, South Korea, and now, brilliantly, in India, a country with huge digital ambitions and indeed capacity. But I think over those years, and Alex, will start with this, I think actually the debate on AI has shifted from kind of technology to strategy. From what these tools can do to what governments are choosing to do with them. And I wanted to maybe just start there. Is if you think about the last few years, you are someone who is at the frontier of developing this technology. The journey that we've been on in the last few years, help us understand that. Where have we come? What is it that is exciting at this moment? And just ground us in where we are so that then we can get onto some of these questions about what we do with it.
Yeah, I think, we are sitting here right now at such an incredibly exciting moment for the technology. I think we are at the beginning of, of a true acceleration in the technology. And, in many ways, it's felt like this very clear acceleration even until now. But I think we're going to see sort of 2026 is an inflection point in many ways. I think to contextualize this over the past few years, I think from 2018 through 2024, really, which is a good 6-year period, we were in the era of pre-training. So we were riding one very large exponential curve towards improving the performance of the models. And that curve was very predictable, and it sort of had clear characteristics where the more resources you put in, the more results you would get out. And there was a lot of questions at the time of whether or not this curve would continue large returns. And I think this was sort of one of the more recent sort of eras of AI skepticism. And then in 2024, towards the end of 2024, began the era of reinforcement learning. So this was sort of the next major wave that stacked on top of the previous wave. And this is when we saw the models begin to learn to reason. And, there's always this meme of, what did Ilya see? Well, Ilya saw reasoning from the models. And it was very clearly this next mega wave of the technology. And even reinforcement learning had, clearly some limitations, and there were all these questions around when that was going to, how long that era was going to last, and maybe there were limitations in that era. And then at the end of 2025, so just a few months ago, I think we've really begun an entirely new paradigm or era of the technology, which is really beginning the era of recursive self-improvement. And I think we're really starting to see this in the development of our models. I think most of the major labs are seeing this in the development of their models, which is that the models themselves have now become instrumental in accelerating the process of producing the next AIs. And so, the sort of, from the outside, what you see is maybe an acceleration of overall development velocity, an acceleration at which the speed at which the new models are being released. Internally, what we see is just dramatic speed-ups. I think the sort of the productivity of an individual researcher has grown dramatically, and we don't expect that to stop. In fact, we expect it to kind of smoothly continue accelerating, where the output of an individual researcher and an individual engineer, well, I think that itself will continue growing exponentially as the technology improves. And the other mega wave that is somewhat coincident with this new paradigm within the sort of development of the technology of recursive self-improvement is really the arrival of agents in earnest. And this is something that has been talked about since, I honestly want to say 2023, with a lot of fanfare. And for a long time, it was sort of one of these hype buzzwords that never actually lived up to the expectations. And I think also at the end of 2025, middle to end of 2025, we started to see agents actually work. And this is, these are where the models can actually start taking actions and start automating entire workflows and being sort of dramatically more productive as actual sort of entities unto themselves versus assisters. And this era is, it started with coding agents. We're starting to see it really percolate through personal agents. This is a big part of what we believe in at Meta. And I think over the course of 2026, we will see large-scale agent deployments in many areas of the economy, many areas of the world, and the sort of, the GDP of AI, so to speak, is going to grow exponentially.
Well, that is very welcome to hear. I think you hit on something that is important, because I remember when I first started doing this in the job, the conversations were all around these scaling laws and would they continue? And you mentioned the skepticism. I mean, not only have they continued and continue to deliver this exponential growth, it feels very much like the last few months have seen an acceleration. And it's what you touched on. It's what Dario and Demis have also said to me and publicly, driven by this recursive self-improvement, that the models themselves are now able to help us develop the new models quicker. So, we're at this quite exciting, but also a moment of some anxiety because of that accelerating development timescale. So I wanted to just then talk about trust, because I give you a story. I have two young girls, and as they're using their chatbots and things, and they're always like, please, so and so and so and so, and thank you when they finish writing their request or they get the answer back. There's lots of pleases and thank yous everywhere. And I thought that was interesting. But I said to them, look, you don't need to do that. There's not a person. It doesn't matter. And by the way, it costs a fortune when we have to do the compute for that. And they said to me, you know what, Daddy? They said, if AI takes over the world, we want to have been kind to the AI. And I thought that was good insurance policy. But it kind of, it touches on this anxiety.
They're very wise.
Yeah, in that maybe. Across the world, we're seeing these different attitudes towards AI. In countries like India, where we are, there's enormous optimism and trust. And then actually in Western countries, we're seeing that anxiety is still the kind of dominant feeling towards AI. Now, I think closing that confidence gap is as much a policy task as it is a technical one. But I'd love to just get your thoughts. I mean, obviously you are at a B2C company dealing with billions of consumers every day. How do you think about this trust question? How do we get trust up in places where it is not, for something that you believe, I believe, and everyone in this room probably believes can do untold good?
Yeah, this is one of the most important questions, and actually, perhaps even more so than the technology and the development of the technology, maybe will govern how successfully the technology diffuses, more so than anything. And we think deeply about this, because our vision for the technology is that we can deploy personal agents that know you better than most people know about your health, know about your goals, know about your relationships, know about your family and your friends, and can really help you live your life more effectively, can help you be healthier, can help you accomplish projects that you never would have had time for, can help you build the business you always wanted, can help you explore your interests. And to properly build that requires an immense amount of trust from consumers, from governments, from effectively everyone, from all organizations. And so, this is one of these interesting moments where I think because the sort of the form of the technology that we want it to take is so intimate and is so deeply tied with what we think is really the future of the consumer life, and the consumer is at the core of their relationship with technology. The figuring out ways to develop the technology in partnership with governing bodies and in partnership with nonprofits and other organizations to garner that trust is very important. This is something we've seen at Meta actually in with WhatsApp. We were talking about this actually backstage, but WhatsApp has become incredibly ubiquitous and a real, I think, utility for much of the world, in large part due to its commitment to privacy and the sort of trust that we've built around WhatsApp as an organization. Oftentimes at the sort of, not necessarily for the optimization of our business objectives, but for the optimization of trust in WhatsApp as a platform. I think a similar journey will be necessary for the AI products of the modern age, and we've seen, we've already seen various kerfuffles or sort of jabs back and forth between the existing AI products and labs around whether their actions are truly garnering, truly building this these levels of trust. But and then I think the topic that you really kicked off at Bletchley around in a sort of like global way around safety, I think.
Hello and welcome, I'm Ellie Richardson and you are watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. Iran has not agreed to all the red lines set out by US President Donald Trump for a diplomatic solution, Vice President J.D. Vance said after talks in Geneva. Vance appeared to indicate that the United States will still be interested in diplomacy after Trump threatened force if Iran's clerical state does not agree on key concerns, starting with its nuclear program. Ukrainian and Russian negotiators are resuming a second round of peace talks in Geneva today, as US envoy Steve Witkoff and that talks had brought about meaningful progress in the Washington-led drive to end Europe's biggest war since World War II. A frantic search is underway for 10 backcountry skiers missing in an avalanche in the mountains of California, where a huge storm dumped heavy snow. Officials say a group of 16 people, 4 guides and 12 clients, were caught up in the avalanche. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi said ties between India and France are very special after talks with President Emmanuel Macron during his 3-day visit for the AI summit. Armed group Hezbollah rejected the Lebanese government's decision to grant the army at least 4 months to advance to the second phase of a nationwide disarmament plan, saying it would not accept what it sees as a move serving Israel. Millions of files related to the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein suggest the existence of a global criminal enterprise that carried out acts meeting the legal threshold of crimes against humanity, according to a panel of independent experts appointed by the United Nations Human Rights Council. The Vatican will not participate in US President Donald Trump's Board of Peace initiative. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Vatican's top diplomatic official, has said, while adding that efforts to handle crisis situations should be managed by the United Nations. Pope Leo, the first US Pope and critic of some of Trump's policies, was invited to join the board in January. California Attorney General Rob Bonta is building an artificial intelligence accountability program as his office probes Elon Musk's XAI over the generation of non-consensual sexually explicit images. Bonta moved quickly last month to send a cease and desist letter to XAI as regulators globally investigated the company. And for your top story this hour, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araqchi says that the United States' decision to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal in 2018 severely undermined trust in the negotiation process. Speaking at a disarmament conference in Geneva, Araqchi said Tehran has long been ready to address international concerns and insists Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. He made the comments after a second round of indirect talks with Washington over the long-running dispute. Araqchi said the US exit from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action dealt a major blow to multilateral trust. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has renewed pressure on Tehran, even raising the possibility of regime change. Outside the talks near Geneva, protesters shouted as the Iranian delegation left the venue, with police moving some demonstrators back. At the same time, Iran announced temporary closures in parts of the Strait of Hormuz for military drills, a move that has raised fresh concerns over regional stability and global oil flows. We are now being joined by Professor Veselin Popovsky, who is a professor and Vice Dean for Global Laws for a Global Law School, who's joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. Iran's foreign minister says Tehran is prepared to discuss its nuclear program. How significant is this statement in the context of recent indirect talks with the United States?
Well, it's understandable why Iran is eager to cooperate here, exactly because it's in a very difficult position. Through the protests over the last months, the Iranian population will continue to protest. And this government has no other option rather than to cooperate, rather than to escalate any hostilities with its own people, but also with the United States. So that's the only survival point of this government, is to kind of continue to negotiate nuclear deals with the United States, but also with other actors. And for that matter, somehow to distract the otherwise heavy hammers hits on his head, including internationally, as I said, and also domestically. So it's a survival instinct. They have no other options rather than to cooperate here. The American shipments all around Iran, the military, navy, and all that around Iran is already a signal that Iran has to agree with the elimination of its nuclear military facilities. They can obviously reduce the nuclear reactors to a minimum to produce energy for civilian use. Nobody will disallow them to do that. But the fact that over the years they raised so many suspicions, and correct one, that this is not simply for civilian use, but effectively for military use. From 5%, they went to 60% enrichment of uranium, which already is a clear signal this is a military use, not civilian. So for that matter, yes, Iran is in the corner. They have a lot of pressure domestically and globally. They have to cooperate. And here comes the foreign minister's statement in Geneva that they are willing to continue the negotiations. On the other hand, they try to keep their face and to say it's not end of it, accusing United States, by the way, for breaking the previous deal, which was again, the previous Trump administration effectively made a big mistakes back in 2018. There was a deal signed and implemented by Obama and other countries. It's not only United States, Iran. Many countries at that time were involved in that negotiations and a deal, European Union, China, Israel. But then, yes, that decision of Donald Trump to eliminate everything that Barack Obama did was wrong. That was a mistake. And now we are back in square one trying to negotiate what has been already negotiated back 8 years ago. So yes, but hopefully, yes, this time around, we expect maybe some good news here, because Iran, as I mentioned, has no other option, but also United States doesn't like the military option. After Venezuela and the arrest of Maduro, somehow for Donald Trump, it's better to have negotiations and deals. Yes, he's always pretending to be the president of deals, not of military interventions. And for that matter, both for Iran and for United States, negotiations are the preferable tool to continue here.
And to what extent do these loud protests that are going on, do these indicate broader public frustration within Iran about domestic issues, foreign policy, or both?
Absolutely. Iranian people will continue those protests. Nothing has changed there. Human rights situation is horrible in Iran. So many arrested after every protest, and they are in prison. A lot of them were killed, thousands actually, several. We don't know exactly the number, but in a 4-digit numbers of those protesters were killed on the street. And that doesn't go away from the memories of their relatives, but also from all Iranian people all over the world. We have protests in Geneva, and everywhere that the foreign minister will go will face those angry Iranian exiles and all of them. Nothing has changed. The situation doesn't improve. Iran is under sanctions. The economy is in misery in Iran. And that is probably the best signal here that how detrimental was this rule of the Ayatollah since 1979 already, almost 50 years. The situation doesn't go any better. Iran is in isolation. The domestic economy is collapsing. And people are not happy. They are losing jobs. They are losing opportunities. Women have no any gender equality, what happens almost everywhere in the world, by the way. Even Saudi Arabia changed some laws to allow women to go out and to study in university and all of that, but not in Iran. Iran continues to be horribly restrictive to women's rights, and for that matter, yes, protests will come. They should continue until some real changes do happen, not cosmetic, but real changes in Iran. Again, maybe not returning the Shah Pahlavi, because that's another historical disappointment, I must say, by Iranians, but some new democratically elected president without any influence from the Ayatollahs. And for that matter, yes, I think this is the big problem of Iran, is not the nuclear program. It is the total economic mismanagement over decades that made people so angry with the regime, and they will continue to protest until they see some hope, some changes, like in many other countries in the world. See, when those regimes were gone over time, not quickly, but over time, we see changes. In Eastern Europe, that was the same. After 50 years of communism, the Eastern European countries got democratically elected leadership, and they're much better now. Some of the even Middle East countries, like Tunisia, also even Iraq, removing Saddam Hussein of Iraq, over time. Again, I'm not saying that was the right model of doing things with invasion by United States. That is totally illegal in international law. But the Iraqi people over time got some sort of economic opportunities today, which was impossible under Saddam Hussein regime.
Thank you, Professor Popovsky, but please don't go too far, as we will be coming back to you very shortly. Russian Foreign Ministry has said that Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will be holding talks with his Cuban counterparts in Moscow. Russia has called the US blockade against Cuba as illegitimate. Meanwhile, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakhodova has said that Moscow will be continuing to provide support to Cuba. We are now being rejoined by Professor Popovsky. Thank you for rejoining us back here on NewsX World. In what ways could discussions between Russia and Cuba influence their responses to external pressure, such as US sanctions and diplomatic isolation?
Yes, you're right, Ailey. There is not much here to expect. They lost Venezuela already. Cuba is really in trouble because they cannot receive any oil anymore from Venezuela. But it also shows how desperate are those few remaining friends of Russia around the world. Nobody else will go to Moscow apart from the Cuban foreign minister, because Cuba is in such a misery and trouble. They have no other friends left. And Russia has no more friends apart from North Korea, Belarus, Cuba. That's it. Only those countries can meet Putin and Lavrov. There is no more anybody else disillusioned anymore to cooperate with. Yes, they will ask for money, of course. Cubans have no other friend in the world. They have to ask some, but Russia doesn't have money anymore. That's the horrible news for the Cubans, because Russia itself spends millions in a useless war for 4 years in Ukraine. Russia has no money to help Syria. They didn't help Syria when the regime change happened. They couldn't help Maduro and Venezuela. And where Russia will find money for Cuba, I have no idea, with the collapsing Russian economy already for several months. So the only message here is that if you don't really change your foreign policy, and if you don't become a really international player, if you don't have democratically elected leaders, that's the end story of all those. We mentioned Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi in the past. Everybody who wants to held power forever and become an isolated pariah in the world, that's what they face. Cubans should make their choices, especially after seeing Maduro, their only friend in Latin America, gone. Well, what is next for Cuba? Yes, they have to think about how Russia will help. I don't know. I don't think Russia can help anybody. Russia couldn't help Armenia, which is the neighboring country. Armenians, which are historically close to Russia and had all the help and assistance from Putin, they already talked to Americans and Chinese. So yes, that's one direction, one end for those who don't understand what the world today is about. There are these ideological preferences to Russia and these anti-Western rhetorics, anti-colonial and anti-imperial rhetoric, but that doesn't help. So yes, Cuba is under sanctions, and Russia is under sanctions, obviously, for the invasion in Ukraine. And nothing good can happen of that meeting. They will promise each other, exactly like Russia promised Maduro a lot of military support, by the way. There was a military contract between Venezuela and Russia. And what happened? For 45 minutes, I think, the Americans took Maduro out of Venezuela. That is what's going to happen for everybody who expects any support from Russia in the future. Look at Maduro, who expected Russians to help him. Where is he now? The same for Cubans and for everybody else who hope still Russia will help us.
Thank you so much, Professor Popovsky, for joining us here today on NewsX World. It was a pleasure speaking with you. NVIDIA announced a multi-year deal with Meta Platforms to sell millions of its AI chips, including both current and future models. The deal covers NVIDIA's Blackwell chips as well as the forthcoming Rubin AI chips, along with standalone installations of its Grace and Vera central processors. These processors, based on ARM technology, are designed to power emerging fields like AI agents, but also handle traditional tech tasks like running database. These moves come as Meta is also developing its own AI chips and in talks with Google about using its Tensor Processing Units, or TPUS. NVIDIA says its Grace processors have already demonstrated half the power consumption of other chips for database tasks, with expected improvements coming with the next generation. India and France have agreed to elevate their relationship to a special global strategic partnership, marking a major step in bilateral ties. The announcement came during the official visit of French President Emmanuel Macron to India at the invitation of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The two leaders held talks in Mumbai and jointly inaugurated the 2026 India-France Year of Innovation. Both sides said the upgraded partnership will guide cooperation in defence, nuclear energy, space, artificial intelligence, trade, climate action and people-to-people exchanges under the Horizon 2047 roadmap. France reiterated strong support for India's permanent membership of a reformed United Nations Security Council, where both leaders called for an effective multilateralism and rules-based international order. President Macron also invited Prime Minister Modi to the 2026 G7 summit in France, underscoring India's growing role in global economic and security discussions. We are now being joined by Ambassador Ashok Sajaha, who is a former Indian diplomat joining us from New Delhi. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. What are the key elements of this new special global strategic partnership between India and France, and why have both leaders emphasized it as crucial in an uncertain world?
Yes, thank you very much for having me on your show. This is a very special occasion. I think we need to remember that France was the first Western nation in 1998 that India signed a strategic partnership. We celebrated the 25th anniversary, the silver jubilee of that in 2023. And that is when the Horizon 2047 program was launched. But the fact that we are upgrading it, elevating it to the level of special global strategic partnership, I think it is significant because it is the context in which this action has been taken. There is great uncertainty in the world. There is lack of credibility, lack of reliability, and predictability has become a very important and a very rare commodity as far as global affairs are concerned. So in that context, when two countries look upon each other as credible partners, as predictable partners, as trustworthy partners, then that is something very important. And in that context, I think this strategic global partnership will promote certainty, will promote credibility, and will promote stability and prosperity in the world. So it is in that context that this decision has been taken. And of course, the relationship is very broad-based. It is very deep. It is further sought to be enhanced by getting more elements of technology, of artificial intelligence, of green energy in this partnership. Of innovation, the Year of Innovation has been launched. Both India and France are innovation partners of each other. So there is a great trust factor between the two countries, which is a commodity that is at high premium these days.
Thank you, Ambassador Ashok, but please don't go anywhere as we will be back with you very shortly. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been engaged in a series of high-level bilateral meetings at the India AI Impact Summit 2026, taking place at the Bharat Mandapam, New Delhi, from February the 16th to the 20th. These discussions focus on strengthening global ties in AI, digital innovation and strategic partnerships. PM Modi met with French President Emmanuel Macron to inaugurate the India-France Year of Innovation 2026, highlighting AI demonstration. He also held talks with Finnish PM Petteri Orpo discussing AI research and digital cooperation. Indian PM Modi and Spanish President Pedro Sanchez focused on trade, digital innovation and climate action. Further, PM Modi met with Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić and Croatian PM Andrej Plenković to deepen trade and investment ties. With over 110 countries and 30 international organisations participating, the summit is pivotal in shaping global AI policies and collaborations. We are now being rejoined by Ambassador Ashok. Thank you for joining us back here on NewsX World. How important is AI cooperation becoming in India's foreign policy and global strategy?
Yeah, it is very significant. It's very important because we see that there is a dominance of two major players, that is the United States and China. As far as AI is concerned, the progress in AI, as far as the large language models are concerned, they are concentrated basically in these two geographies. So I think the fact that there is not dependence of other countries of the world on these two powers, there is no AI imperialism or AI dominance of these two countries. The other countries have to cooperate, they have to collaborate, they have to come together and also try to develop the same technologies. So India and France are collaborating in this. We want inclusive artificial intelligence. All the benefits should be given to the other countries. Also, it should not be misused as far as misinformation, disinformation, fake news is concerned. We would like that to be taken care of. So in that context, the collaboration between two powers like India and France is very useful. We have recently also seen the signing of an India-EU FTA, very ambitious agreement. So we would like to collaborate. India is investing very significantly in this particular sector, and we would like to collaborate with other partners like the European Union, France being one component of it, Japan, South Korea, and or the other major players in developing artificial intelligence that can be made available to everyone, that there is no divide between different countries, between different segments of society. So in that context, it is very significant that both countries are collaborating in this sector.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Ashok, for joining us here today on NewsX World.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Pleasure
you.
to be with you. Thank you.
Now our correspondent Thomas Porteous, who is intensively covering the AI Impact Summit at the Bharat Mandapam, has spoken to the Global Education and Adolescent Development Director at UNICEF, Pia Rebello Barritio. Let's cut across.
Hello, you are watching NewsX World. We are here at the Bharat Mandapam in New Delhi for the AI Impact Summit here in the Indian capital. Joining us now to discuss her session on AI in education is Pia Rebello Barritio. She's the Global Director for Education and Adolescent Development at UNICEF. Thank you very much, Pia, for joining us here on NewsX World.
My pleasure to be here and great to chat with you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Many countries, of course, are adopting AI in their learning. What more can you tell us about artificial intelligence in classrooms, especially in developing nations like India? This, of course, is, after all, the first AI summit in the global south. What does that mean?
It's a very exciting time for the world of education because we are in what's been called a global learning crisis. And there have been many system failures that are either leaving children behind or depriving them of learning opportunities. So we're at a very interesting, pivotal moment in history where, with cautious optimism, we think that this profound tool could present solutions So for example, one of the biggest challenges facing the world is the number of children out of school. And you would think 2026, we have kids out of school. Yes, 272 million children are out of school right now. Their learning is being denied. So we need solutions to make that possible. And what we're seeing, for example, in the state of Gujarat, is they are using large data models and systems to be able to forecast and predict the risk of children who are going to drop out. So it's not kids drop out and you go in with the intervention and bring them back. It's a prevention model that you are already anticipating or forecasting who are at risk of dropping out. And right now, the models are pretty good. They're over 73% accurate. So they're able to already predict that and get kids back to school. So there are many such tools and solutions we're excited about. But having said that, if they are not delivered and deployed with equity, we are at risk of creating a bigger divide. And this is really critical. We have to have equity. We have to be able to have children safe. They have to be human-centered. And the solutions have to be shaped for the global south. If we put these 4 principles in, we are on a road to potentially bringing a lot of exciting solutions that could transform education.
Indeed. It's fascinating. And millions of children, of course, are still struggling with the lack of education all around the world, as you've said, over nearly 300 million children. Are we expecting too much from this technology, or can it solve all those problems?
Technology itself cannot. So let's be clear on that. We've had EdTech at scale for 2 decades. And what has it changed for learning? And I always use the phrase and say notmuch.com, because it hasn't changed that much. So if we do want this tool to actually change learning, pedagogy has to influence technology. That's the shift that has to occur, not technology trying to shape an education system. And this is the age at which, as these products are being developed, as the engineers are thinking about what's the next big thing we can do, we've got to bring in the school system. We've got to bring in the learning science. How does the brain learn? We've got to bring in that to influence learning. And that's where we're going to see the change. And I talked about equity earlier. Again, equity comes in. The language models are based on about 10% of languages from the world. So how do we actually get to 90% of the kids? Again, we've got to shape it in an equitable manner. So it is distributed in a way that it lands with relevance and context. So there's a lot of hope, but it can't be led just by the tech side. Devices and technology don't equal equity. It's when you bring in the human-centeredness, you bring in the teaching, learning environment, you bring in what we know from the learning science, that's when we're going to see the change.
And teenagers all around the world are using AI. Are we moving too fast without them fully understanding? Are we losing the classroom in a traditional sense?
You know, this is such a conundrum, no? Because tech is just moving at its pace. It's not waiting for anyone. But if we sit on the sidelines and wait, maybe we just miss the train completely. So it's finding that balance of being on that train or that plane, but also understanding how to be responsible about it. And I think that's where school systems and education systems are going. How do we use these tools? How do we bring in the responsibility, the child safeguards? And that's what the systems have to do. The systems have to do the safeguards so that it can be used responsibly. But I don't think time is an option. I don't think that either the way we are doing it or the way technology is working, it's not working on the time continuum that we are used to. It's got its own speed of going. And I think we have to embrace it with the cautious optimism and the responsibility that goes with anything new.
And Pierre, of course, we're on day 2 out of 5 in this summit. If this went perfectly, what would we want to come out of it?
That children are at the heart of any conversation on AI going forward.
Pierre, thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a great pleasure to have you on the program.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Well, there we have it. That is all that's time for our interview. Pleasure to talk to Pierre here on NewsX World. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas, for giving us that insight. That's all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.